Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Dojo Live. I'm Tulio Siragusa, broadcasting from Southern California, joined today by Kim Lantis in Hermosillo, Mexico, and
Hello.
Carlos Ponce in Cuernavaca, Mexico. And, of course, our guest, Jenn Bonine, who is broadcasting from Minnesota. Today is Wednesday, June 23rd, 2021. All right, guys, let's do this. Let's have some fun. Jenn, welcome to the show. We appreciate having you. We're going to be talking about AI, our favorite subject here on Dojo Live, and the impact it's having on humans. But before we do that, let's get to know you a little bit. Please tell us about yourself.
Yeah, well, first of all, I think I started my entrepreneurial journey at 5. So when I was 5 years old, I created a company, and it was toy redistribution. So my goal was redistribute the toys that the kids didn't play with. We would have a ticketing system, and you could exchange for other toys that you wanted that were someone else's in the neighborhood. Little did I know my parents would get calls about waivers and liability and all of that. So at about 5 years old, I was starting to already cause some trouble in the entrepreneurial world about how to think about legal terms and whatnot. And from there, I've just grown into corporate, which didn't serve me as well as entrepreneurial spirit does. So I made my way back out of corporate America and into really this space of being an entrepreneur and driving impactful change in the world. And that's really where I come from. I didn't see a lot of diversity in technology companies. I worked for large tech companies, and it wasn't super diverse on the people on the teams and building the solutions. So I decided it was time for me to, instead of talking about wanting it, to actually go out and build a really diverse team and company and build my own organization.
Awesome. You know what they say, corporate kills the inner child. So if you want to get it back, you got to become an entrepreneur. Love it. All right. Tell us about RedRex.
RedRex. So actually, funny story. I started at 5. I happen to have a 5-year-old son. And I had a company that we started. I have 2 co-founders that I started another company with in 2019 that was AI-based. We did really well. We actually ended up selling that company in March of 2020. Because we had such rapid growth. It was in a space that people wanted. And then my son one day, before the sale was closed, he actually looked at me and he said, "Mommy, do these people work for you?" And he named off 4 or 5 people in my organization. And I said, "Absolutely. They're part of our team here." He said, "Well, they now work for me, and the company is called RedRex." And I said, "Oh, really? Interesting. You just took all of my people and acquired them and created a company around it." So funny enough, after we sold the company, it made sense to us. Our old company was called Pink Lion. Our new company, RedRex. We've had a lot of good luck with animals and colors. So we're going to keep going.
I love it.
I was wondering about the hat, and I should have put 2 and 2 together a lot earlier, but it makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
RedRex. It's easy to see. It's like, we all think of that little horse that a lot of people have on their clothing. It's memorable. And we wanted a tech company that was memorable. Like you would remember the logo and it resonated a feeling or something for you that was positive or conjured, those ideas of when you were a child, that childlike spirit. So
that's funny. I was just thinking about that. My first dog as a child, his name was Rex. So I was just thinking about childhood memories.
Wow.
All right, let's go right into it. Kim, let's introduce the topic and the question and see what we can learn today.
Before we do that, we've got the RedRex name, but you have not identified what your company is or what they do.
Yes. So we always with the names, so you never forget.
I got so caught up in the memories.
Right. Exactly. What does your company do?
We actually, when you see it, it makes a lot of sense, but we build digital spaces. So we're digital architects who take whatever you have in your physical world, whether it's a school, an office building, your home. We create a digital safe space where you can digitally transport between home, school, work, wherever you need to go, and connect and collaborate with other people that you need to connect and collaborate with.
Cool.
Okay. So the ability to move, what are we, 3-dimensionally in a 1-dimensional, 2-dimensional? I don't know. What is the internet space?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but so what's so fun is like we anchor buildings on a physical map. So imagine you're looking at this dimensional map where I could go to Kim where you are, and I would zoom in on you and the inside of where you are in that building and your home and what you're experiencing, or I could move on to another building, the Louvre in Paris. I could go somewhere else. So we create this ability to transport yourself to different spaces without ever leaving, which is incredibly important, especially for people with accessibility issues, or frankly, people right now when we just aren't allowed to go certain spaces and be with other people.
So very, very timely coming up in what has been happening in 2020, 2021. And so good for you.
I got a million questions, whether it's immersive, 3D goggles, but let's introduce the topic.
I know, I had that in my mind too. I'm thinking like a VR goggle. All right, great. So today's topic, as chosen by you, Jenn, is tech for good and the impact of AI on all humans. So I think we touched into that quite a bit already with accessibility, but more specifically, how does AI make decisions every day that impact humans? So my first question for you is why? Why this topic? Why did you choose to speak about this today?
Well, it's interesting. Besides RedRex and what we do there, there's an element of AI built into it. But the premise of the technology was that the consumers or users own their own data. So it's a safe, secure space where the data is not publicly available and it's not sold or monetized in any way. So we went down that path as we started to see when we were in our other organization we were building, the need by large companies, which we've all seen, to want to monetize, monitor, and watch everything everyone's doing at all times. And the consumers pulling back saying, you know, I should have some right to some of the privacy of my own information and data. So part of what we were seeing was lack of regulation on the algorithms. So the algorithms being just basically the math, deciding different outcomes, right? Those algorithms don't have a set standard yet in the world. So a level of accuracy that they have to adhere to. But yet many companies are using these math algorithms to determine whether or not you get a job, or whether or not you get approved for credit, whether or not you get interviewed for a job, but yet they're not completely accurate. So we wanted to build a company and technology that stood for a higher standard, even though it wasn't mandated or regulated yet in the, globally. There wasn't a set standard for it, but we said, this is what we're about. So we're going to build something that adheres to a standard above what's required right now in terms of technology.
Yeah, that's amazing. We had, not too long ago, we had a couple of guests. One was actually a professor of ethics. And I learned something new, which was the fact that a lot of these algorithms actually have built-in bias in them because they're leveraging historical insights that may have had bias, right? So what they're doing is repeating and automating the worst possible scenarios in some cases, specifically when it comes to offer to certain consumers based on psychodemographic information, socioeconomic information, etc. So we've learned like the importance of, spending time to actually have an ethics approach to challenging the algorithms. I'm encouraged by what you guys are doing, but how do you actually make that, come to reality? Like, do you have people that are going in and testing the outcomes and then readjusting? How is that working for you guys?
Yeah, that's actually what we do. So data sets are readily available in different places publicly, right? So there's public data sets. But what you have to do is exactly what you just mentioned, test those data sets to make sure you're not just replicating a past pattern of behavior that isn't effective. So there is actually in the US an organization called the AJR the AJL, the Algorithm Justice League. And it was started by a group of women at MIT and in the data science field that said, we need to start challenging these algorithms and the level of accuracy. So they're an independent organization, that Algorithm Justice League, that helps you with vetting the data set for level of accuracy against different populations, demographics. I mean, because we think of AI as just data, but it's also fingerprint data, visual and facial recognition. Like a lot of these algorithms aren't incredibly accurate unless your skin is of a certain skin tone. It only picks up certain skin tones. They were seeing at MIT, for example, darker skin tones wouldn't even get picked up until they had whiter paint or a white mask or something over their face to be able to recognize the differentiator. So what that means is, and the reality of this is, if I go to a visual recognition, I, with darker skin, could be identified as a criminal or someone else who looks similar in the database, but it's only because it can pinpoint my exact facial recognition because of the tone or color of my skin.
Wow.
Jen, I got a couple of quick questions for you. And well, you're describing a rather interesting, in my viewpoint from as a layman, it's a rather complex, technically speaking, concept, right? So two things. The first thing is we're talking about digital buildings on physical addresses that I'm assuming take place or are located in the real world, right? So the first question is, how do you do this? I mean, help me understand. Is this some type of augmented reality type of scenario, or what is, can you explain a little bit what the tech secrets here are from a layman's perspective, so we can understand it?
Yeah, absolutely. So first, how it starts is we get commissioned to build a building, just like you would commission a physical building in the real world, right? A construction company. We're digital architects. So what
I totally have Roblox coming in my
We're like digital architects. Yeah, Roblox and steroids kind of thing. But yeah, that's exactly right.
I'm a mom.
Exactly, though, right? So where we saw it first was schools. So any parent out there watching that went through the last 18 months recognizes that schools struggled with going online. So it was literally a link. You join a classroom. If you have 3 children, you're struggling to figure out whose link is which one. What we did was built a digital school. So imagine your real school your kids go to, and there's a kindergarten class and a first grade class and a second grade class. This digital building, when the students log in, it would know this is their school. It's one login. It keeps their access. And they would walk into their kindergarten classroom. So we put them in that classroom digitally. So they just click on a picture of their teacher. If they can't read, they click on a picture of a turtle so they know they're in the turtle room, and they can get into that classroom, and they're now connected to their teacher, just like we are here. So it has audio, video connectivity once you pop into your rooms. We do have the capability to do it in AR and VR, but frankly, where we're meeting consumers right now is last mile, which means as long as I have an internet connection, you can get into one of our digital spaces or buildings. So we're not limiting people's ability for accessibility to the capability to have headsets and be able to do AR and VR. It absolutely can go there. We could go there very quickly.
Or age, emotional intelligence, or any other accessibility issues that might be involved. I'm assuming there's some types of controls where you could limit access to certain rooms or places, or you could have free reign, like in an office space where I want to drink a coffee with a teammate or see who's hanging out in the kitchen. I don't know. So you can control who can go where, but also have full access?
We can actually control building access. So when you click on the building on the map, it'll tell you have access or you don't. If it's not a public building, say it's a research laboratory and you don't have access, it'll say no access, contact the administrator if you need to come in. Or if you're a guest, you can say, I'm a guest, I'm here to visit so-and-so, you have temporary badge access to get in. Our digital buildings operate very similar to physical buildings in that I can badge a building, I can badge a floor, and I can badge a room. But in digital buildings, I can badge the walls. So imagine you can go into your office and you'll let people in, but if one of your walls is your email, they don't have badge access to see that wall. So they can't click the wall and see all of your email. But if you're in your room and you want to display your email on a wall, you have the ability to see that on that wall. So it provides another additional layer of security inside these buildings around who can see what and what the accessibility is of those.
And who's your? Let me ask you something real quick. My second question was, who's your target client? Who's your client?
Yeah. So we have 4 really big areas that took off this last year, but it really applies to a lot of use cases. The 4 areas that took off were esports. So esports teams are able in our buildings to stream live all of their different events that are going on for tournaments, things you would have to go to different streams to see. We can broadcast all those streams in a single esports team room and building. Where they can actually play and do that. We also offer esports learning academies on the platform where people can come in and take lessons on esports from players all over the world. So they're learning from the top players and they don't have to go anywhere to do it. Startups love it because right now startups don't want physical space or buildings. And a lot of times their teams are based all over the world. Doesn't make sense for them. Think about your healthcare. Imagine you're seeking treatment for something very complex like cancer or a sophisticated diagnosis. Today, if you want information, you have to go to your primary care physician. You have an oncologist, you have a nutritionist, you probably have someone who's working on therapy and help around this. What we can do in our buildings for medicine and health is basically create those portals through our walls to different physicians' systems so that they don't all physically have to connect. We do all that work for them. So those 5 or 6 care providers can digitally get in a space, talk about your case, come to resolution either with you or on their own as a care team, and then provide that data and information in a single pane of glass. So we're really simplifying access to information in single panes of glass.
That's great. And just like the speed, no longer having to wait weeks between one specialist to the other and then wait for them to touch bases. Life-saving, really. I wanted to go back to what you were talking about earlier, and that was just the ethics of AI, which was what I understand to be very foundational to what you're doing at RedRex. Mm-hmm. So awesome technology aside, what were some of those foundational questions that you as a company were asking yourselves when you determined what is our AI? How are we going to do it? To sort of, as I understand it, with this goal of paving the way for AI in the future. So what were those questions? What were the answers or the determination factors that you were using to develop your technology?
Yeah, so we, starting out, I joke about, but I did spend a long time at a small consulting firm called Accenture, which a lot of people know that name, and did a lot of implementations and learned a lot of things by working in different industries. And from there, went to another small tech company called Oracle and worked with them for a long time, and then went on to a lot of other tech companies and kind of took all of the things I learned by working with these different companies about how to view what we're doing and the consumer. And we kind of pivoted completely from revenue first, which is not popular when you're raising funds as a startup, but we pivoted to social impact first. So if we have social impact and we target the areas that are hurting the most during this pandemic, education, access to healthcare, these socially responsible areas, and we look at those first, help them solve with technology, and we do it in an ethical way where people feel safe so that they can go there, they can feel like their data isn't being, when you take a digital doctor's visit, that not everyone in the planet can see your digital health records and that we're not selling access to that data. That was our concept, was tip it on its head, social impact at our core of what we build. And then is it the right thing to build? We could build it and make money on it, but is it the right thing to build? And that's constantly at RedRex what myself and my 2 co-founders question, is it the right thing?
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing how the big focus was always customer share of wallet, right? So without regard of the impact that would have on certain groups of people, And then fast forward in a more transparent world, that kind of blows up in your face, and you end up alienating a whole group of people and lose clients. So that became short-term thinking for a lot of these companies, just focus on share of wallet. So congratulations for doing something that not only is ethically morally the right thing to do, but also will probably benefit the companies long term from having a more diverse and inclusive business model like this. It's got to be really tough to put this kind of thing together, because you've got you're constantly challenging yourselves to see if you've built the right solution. How do you go about doing that? How have you structured your teams in terms of the product itself to effectively do that? You've got developers, you've got QA. Do you have, like, are you using an agile methodology? How are you inserting these checks and balances in the development cycle of the product?
Yeah, the one thing we're really fortunate to have is really deep relationships with folks at companies in the industry from our history of working with them at other organizations. So we always select friendlies, we call them beta customers, where we're getting feedback from them directly on, does this work for them? Is it what they would want to see or need? And we're iterating on that. So we actually use a design thinking methodology in play. So we are very much, we prototype, we try, then we'll change it again. And in that model, we're not getting stuck on any one thing, and we're seeking that feedback throughout the entire process from consumers and talking real life with them. The other thing that we do besides design thinking is we do diversity of thought. So a lot of people think about it just as diversity in companies, but we really seek diversity of thought. So what we end up doing is, I myself came from a tech background, but more around leading strategy, so tech strategy and what's the next generation piece. Two of my co-founders, one of them is very good at implementation. Like, once we get it out, how's this actually going to scale and how will people be able to deploy it easily? And the third person is a tech genius. So I like to say that the three of us challenge each other really effectively on different approaches to the product and what we're building and where we're going next and how we're doing that.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's got to be it's got to be quite a challenge, I would say, especially since diversity of thought. We talk a lot about diversity in general, but then there's a lot of cancel culture that's creeped up in recent years, which doesn't encourage diversity of thought. It's like, you have to think this way or get canceled. So that's got to be a tough one. It seems like you guys are constantly going against the grain and challenging the status quo, and I love that. I think that's brilliant. In building this business as an entrepreneur, since the last time you were an entrepreneur when you were 5 and so on, any lessons and learnings you've come across that you'd like to share with other people that perhaps are trying to literally disrupt the way things are done in the world? Any words of wisdom you'd like to share with them?
Yeah, I would say a couple of things. So one of the things that we learned was be authentically who you are, right? People in the world enjoy the authenticity of the founders and knowing what you care about and being transparent about that. Instead of, I think a lot of startups go for, how do I raise money? How do I make myself attractive to investors? And obviously for a startup, it's important to have money to build your company. But we sought alternative forms of capital that are out there now so that we wouldn't lose the authenticity and the culture that we wanted in the company we were building. And be careful about what you give up in terms of your company too. So I've seen a lot of founders that have great ideas, but they seek so much for funding and they raise so much money so early that they lose control over what their vision was of what they're building and what they want to put into the world, that it gets molded into what traditional venture wants to see instead of what really fits the consumer. So if you look at a lot of startups, they fit one niche or one need. We got questioned a lot because, as I've talked to you about, our product fits lots of different needs, but we did that on purpose because we weren't looking to piece it up and sell it to someone. We were actually looking to build something sustainable for the future, for the people we were building it for.
Brilliant. I saw a video a couple of days ago. I don't remember who it was, but it said something like, if you come work for me and I'm going to disappoint you. But if you come work and focus on the client and the customer's needs, you'll never get disappointed because you're always going to try to solve the needs of someone who's interested in what you're trying to do. So congratulations on that. We've enjoyed speaking with you. We're wrapping up in just a minute or two. And you guys have any final questions for Jenn before we announce what's coming up?
No, not really. I mean, not on my end. I mean, it's been very educational, and I guess that the AI as you know, any AI related topic is of interest to me because I'm still in my learning curve, and I find it fascinating, and I'm amazed at the number of fields and spaces that AI can contribute with, and this is no exception. So I'm just looking forward to watching RedRex skyrocket in the future. And I'll just keep an eye on it and see how it goes. I'm very excited about learning more about this digital, especially because I have a son who's a major in architecture, as you know, Tulio and Kim. So, and I've just shared this with him. He might be watching. If you're watching, Miguel, is a big kiss from your dad. So anything that has to do with, you mentioned, Jenn, you said digital architect, and I go, wow. So this is extremely interesting for me personally, and I guess for my son too, and I'm assuming that for the rest of the world and the audience. So that's, I don't have any other questions other than I look forward to learning more about what RedRex does, and just get excited about it. That's all.
Yeah, look, I mean, if you're watching this and you're building an AI platform or a product, I think the great thing that Jenn has shared with us is you can just let the algorithms do their job, or you can infuse some consciousness behind it, some human ingenuity, and actually question what the algorithms are doing so that you can get to a place where maybe it's a little more cognitive and a little more humane. And that's ultimately what's going to make AI work, is those who learn how to humanize it, and sounds like you guys are well on track to do that. All right, what do we got coming up? We have one more show this week, right, Carlos?
That is correct, Tulio, Kim, Jenn. We have one more show tomorrow, and this is going to be, I think, extremely exciting because we're going to be speaking with one of the principal, the CEO and co-founder of a platform company called Echo.ai, and it's something that is called emotional technology. Okay, so it's an assessment tool that, and I quote, reinvents the status quo in the digital workplace for employees and the company as a whole. So emotional technology, I really look forward to learning what's this about. And this is going to be, the conversation is going to be with two of the principals, as a matter of fact, Christina Imbri and Adam Hocek, the CEO and CTO, respectively, of Echo.ai. So that's what we have for tomorrow right here. The topic will be, why are the current employee assessment tools inaccurate? That's the topic. Right here on Dojo Live tomorrow, 12 p.m. Pacific. So join us, stay tuned, and as ever, be safe, guys.
See you soon.
See you soon.